with that said, let's switch gears. Let's get back on track. Let's talk Final Four. And listen, obviously, look, the 30,000-foot view topic of this Final Four is all of these awesome teams and brands that are here: Villanova, Kansas, North Carolina, Duke. But obviously, the big storyline that is unavoidable is Coach K. It's the retirement tour. He's finally done. These are at most his final 2 games. And there's going to be, over the next 3, 4, 5 days, a lot of different conversations and opinions about Duke and Coach K as he gets set to wrap up a legendary, historic career that, frankly, we're never going to see again. We're never going to see a coach at a school 40-plus years, 1,200 wins. College basketball just isn't built for guys to do that anymore. But one thing that I did find interesting, and like I said, there's all sorts of different opinions kind of coming out. But one thing that I did see that was kind of interesting that I wanted to bring to the table was this. I've heard a few people, and I'll get into details in a minute, explain and say that one of the storylines that they think that is going on in this Final Four is that the average fan is actually rooting for Coach K to go out on top, okay? I'm not talking about diehard Duke fans, and I'm not talking about, by the way, to be clear, diehard fans of other programs, many of which have been scorned by Duke. I'm not talking about diehard North Carolina fans all of a sudden turning in one shade of blue for another. I'm not talking about Kentucky fans forgetting about Christian Laettner to throw rose petals at Coach K's feet. But I am talking about the average fan that has no real rooting interest, that just tunes into the NCAA tournament, that wants to see Coach K go out on top. And I thought it came from an interesting place and an interesting media member who brought it up. Now, to be clear, I do not believe that the average fan is actually rooting for Coach K at all. But I thought it was an interesting topic, so let's discuss it and where this idea came from. It came from a tweet, a social media post from a sports writer that some of you may know and some of you may not know. But his name is Dan Wolken. And I don't know Dan Wolken. Now, I will say he was one of the guys that started the whole thing with J.J. Redick last week trying to come at Torres. You better come at Torres stronger than that, baby. You ain't bringing him down because of one tweet. But Dan Wolken's kind of, I guess you would say, a divisive member of the media. He was one of the guys who really pushed very hard, very publicly to not play sports last year. And I do think he turned a lot of people off with that opinion. As a matter of fact, I think a lot of you found me during that time because of the fact that I was one of the few people saying, listen, I don't know how, but we got to figure out a way to play football. Anyway, Dan Wolken, I don't know if he is either out of touch with sports fans or he is combative and disagreeable for the sake of being disagreeable. But he did put out kind of an interesting tweet that I did think was worth discussing here on this show. And the tweet was this. On Sunday, after the Final Four was set, or maybe it was even Monday, he said he did tweet this, and I thought it was an interesting conversation. He said, serious question. Is all of America rooting against Duke? I think there is a not insignificant group of casuals who would enjoy seeing Coach K walk off with the title. To which I say, I actually do not agree with that at all. But what I will say is, I do think that this listen, I think Duke is the most hateable brand in college basketball if you're not a Duke fan. And that's great, and that's what they're great at, right? No different than right now, Alabama is the most hateable brand because they beat everybody. Now, I'm not saying Duke has had the success of Alabama because I don't think any team in sports has had the success of Alabama over the last 10 years. But Duke is the most recognizable brand. Duke is the most hateable brand. And I do not believe that casuals are rooting for Duke like Dan Wolken said. At the same time, though, I will also say that I do believe that I'm not sold that this particular Duke team is as hateable as it once was. And I'll take a step. I don't even know if Coach K is as hateable as he once was. And so let's get into it. Let's break it down because I do think it's an interesting conversation. And what I would say is this. I don't think casuals are rooting for Duke because I don't know how many casuals there are out there. And two, I will actually say this. I think the reason there are not that many people that are actually rooting for Duke that aren't Duke fans is actually a testament to Coach K. All right? Like, one of the things you cannot deny about Coach K is that in the process of a 40-plus year Hall of Fame career, he has pissed off a lot of fan bases. And that is, I guess, the price or the cost of being great, or I don't even know what the term would be, but that comes with the territory of being great for 4 decades. You win a lot, you break a lot of hearts, you upset a lot of people, and people don't like you. That's part of the deal with Coach K. That's part of what makes him great is all the people he's pissed off over the last 40 years. And so, no, I don't believe casuals are going to be into it because think about all the fan bases that he has pissed off over the last 40 years. First of all, we know about all the ACC teams, right? Carolina. Carolina fans despise Coach K, and with good reason. They're rivals. They should. They've been listen, you have to be probably about the age of 60 right now. Think about this. You got to be the age of 50-plus years old, if you're a Carolina fan, to be old enough to remember rooting for Carolina against Duke before Coach K. So we are talking about 2, 3, 4 generations of Carolina fans that absolutely hate Coach K because of the fact that they're simply big rivals, and Coach K's beaten them a lot. Now, Carolina's beaten them a lot, including the most recent matchup just a few weeks ago. But Coach K's beaten them a lot, too. And you're talking about 40-plus years of hatred that has been built up with the Carolina fan base. And it's not just Carolina. Think about all these ACC teams that have been around since Coach K started. NC State fans hate him. Wake Forest fans hate him. Virginia fans hate him. Georgia Tech fans hate him. So we're talking about 6, 7, 8 programs that have been competing against him nonstop since he got into college basketball in 1980, I think was when he took over the Duke job. On top of that, it's not just the ACC programs, and again, this is a testament to Coach K's greatness, is all of the fan bases that he has pissed off along the way. I've said it before, it kind of blows me away when you think about how many fan bases truly hate Duke and truly hate Coach K. First of all, the most famous one we all know, Kentucky. 1992, Christian Laettner steps on a kid's chest. Then he hits a buzzer beater. Kentucky fans hate Duke. They will always hate Duke because of who they are, how they won, the fact that they knocked out the most likable, the most revered Kentucky team maybe in the history of the Kentucky program in 1992, the Unforgettables. For people who don't know the background, it was basically the whole program went on major NCAA sanctions during the end of the Eddie Sutton era. Basically, the only guys stayed were local Kentucky kids. Anybody that had any other opportunity transferred out, went pro, whatever. Rick Pitino takes this ragtag group of guys, takes them to the Elite Eight. And so Christian Laettner, Duke knocked off one of the most iconic Kentucky teams of all time, and that's why Kentucky fans hate him. I always tell this story, and it blows people away. Christian Laettner also broke the hearts of UConn fans with maybe the most iconic UConn team ever, too. A lot of people don't know this story, but prior to that 1992 national championship run where Christian Laettner knocked out Duke, go back to 1990. UConn, the first great Jim Calhoun team, they called it the dream season. Nobody saw it coming. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, UConn ends up winning the Big East, getting a number 1 seed. It was the team that put the program on the map. UConn has won 4 titles since. No big deal. Hate to brag. They've won 4 titles since 99, 04, 2011, 2014. But at the same time, the 1990 team, for fans that are old enough to remember it, is the most revered and most loved. Well, guess how their season ended? It ended with a Christian Laettner buzzer beater in the Elite Eight to keep UConn out of its first Final Four in school history. And I would add, it took almost a decade. It took 9 more years for Jim Calhoun to get that monkey off his back and make a Final Four. I'm old enough to remember it was a topic in Connecticut. Can Jim Calhoun win the big one? Can Jim Calhoun make a Final Four? It sounds stupid now. He's got 3 national titles. That was a real topic that happened back in the early 90s, and it started with Christian Laettner. Christian Laettner misses that buzzer beater. Coach K doesn't call a great play. Duke's not going to the Final Four. UConn's going to the Final Four in 1990. Ironically, maybe they would have played UNLV in the championship game. On top of that, it's not just Duke. It's not just Carolina. It's not just UConn. Arizona fans. Arizona in 2001 played Duke in the national championship game, and to this day, they believe that there were a lot of calls that went against them that cost them a national championship in 2001. They won one in 97. They thought 2001 was theirs as well. You know how I know that? It's because of the fact that about 5-6 weeks ago, I was in bed with the death flu, if you remember, and I saw this game on, and I tweeted out, maybe I'll watch this to pass the time while I'm trying to just not whatever. I was, 100-plus degree fever or whatever. I bring it up because I tweet out, Arizona Duke replay 2001 championship game. It's on ESPNU. I must have had a dozen Arizona fans like, screw Duke. The call with 2 minutes left, the over the back on Jay Williams. I mean, I don't remember it, but Arizona fans certainly remember Jay Williams climbing over somebody's back to get a rebound that wasn't called that would have that cost Arizona a national championship. So Arizona fans hate them. Maryland fans, you know how much Maryland fans hate Duke after everything they did? Now, Maryland got a little bit of a revenge in 2002 when they went on to win the national championship, but Maryland had a 20-year track record hatred of Duke that really seemed to heighten in the early 2000s. They lose to Duke in the 2001 Final Four. They do end up winning the title in 2002. But I just bring it up to say Maryland fans hate Duke. They're not in the ACC anymore. Arkansas fans. Arkansas played Duke in the 94 Final Four, and Arkansas actually won that game. But if you were on social media this week, you saw Scotty Thurman, Arkansas star, was still chirping at Grant Hill 30 years later. So it shows you how long Coach K has been around, and that's why I don't believe casuals or even a majority or whatever are rooting for Coach K, because I don't know how many casuals there are. Just like I don't know how many casuals there are when the Yankees play in the World Series, or when Notre Dame plays a major college football game, or when the Lakers are in the NBA Finals. When you have 30-plus years of having success against marquee fan bases and then even non-marquee fan bases, you just start to root for and against teams, right? You're either a Carolina guy or a Duke guy. You're either a Lakers guy or a Celtics guy. You're either a Tom Brady guy or a Peyton Manning guy. That's what happens in sports. And so, no, I don't believe that there is a group of casuals that is rooting for Duke. What I would say at the same time, though, I do think that this particular Duke team is a little bit harder to root against. And I'll also say I do think some of the Coach K hate has softened just a tiny bit here over the last couple weeks. I know what you're going to say. Torres, you just said everybody hates Coach K. Now you're saying people love him. No, that's not what I'm saying at all. But what I am saying is that one thing that I have noticed covering sports through the years, and even just being a fan of sports, is that what I will say is I have seen time and time and time again that there are hated players. You hate this guy. And then when you realize, and coaches too, and then when you realize, oh my God, like this is about to be over, all of a sudden people don't hate him or her nearly as much anymore. The first time I really noticed this, it was actually Derek Jeter a few years ago when Derek Jeter retired. Remember, the captain. And if you were a baseball fan, pretty much from like 93, 94, I think the Yankees won their first World Series in 95, to 2009. Derek Jeter broke your heart at some point, right? I mean, Derek Jeter, the iconic play at Oakland Coliseum, running across the field, flipping it, flipping it, getting, I think it was Jeremy Giambi out at the plate. Maybe it was Jason Giambi. I can't remember. He had all these incredible plays. He's diving in the stands against the Red Sox. And it wasn't just Red Sox fans that hated him, just like it's not just North Carolina fans that hate Coach K. Oh, no. A's fans hate him. Braves fans hate him. Marlins fans. I'm just trying to go through every team that he beat at some point in his career. Everybody hated Derek Jeter. But you know what I also noticed? Those final few weeks when you're like, oh my God, Derek Jeter, this is really about to be over. Derek Jeter's really about to be done. What happened? Everybody started liking Derek Jeter. And it was so funny because I just vividly remember that last game, and I don't remember all the details who they were playing. But do you remember Derek Jeter's final game? Do you remember when he got the walk-off hit? And oh my God, there were people crying in the streets. Derek Jeter's little nephew pulls off his hat, says respect with a 2 instead of an S. And everybody's like, oh my God, I love Derek Jeter. I'm so sad to see him go. And these weren't just Yankees fans. Everybody was like, oh my God, that was unbelievable. Derek Jeter just hit a walk-off to win his final game as a Yankee. That's so perfect. And everybody was happy for Derek Jeter, and they're crying in the streets. It's like the end of a movie. By the way, it was the same for the late Kobe Bryant. And I hate even bringing up his name because it's so sad about what has happened. But you remember that last game with Kobe? I mean, for years, everybody hated Kobe, hated him. Wins in the finals. Shaq leaves, comes back, wins again, wins 2 more titles, 5 championships. We hate Kobe. We hate him. And then what happens? He gets old. He has a few injuries. And all of a sudden, you're like, oh, this guy's not going to be around forever. Then he comes out, final night, 60 points against the Utah Jazz. And all of a sudden, people are like, oh, my God, I love Kobe. I'm going to miss him so much. This happens all the time. And I do think to a degree it's happening with Coach K. I don't think people are rooting for him. But I do think the idea of not being able to root against him, that's a great, I didn't even thought of it until this segment right here. This was not in my notes. I don't think people are rooting for him on Saturday, but I do think people are starting to get sad about the idea of not being able to root against him. He is the face of college basketball. Duke is the biggest brand in college basketball. And not having him around, this might be a topic for Friday's show. I don't know what it does for college basketball. I don't know what it does for the Carolina-Duke rivalry. Is Carolina-Duke going to be as hated without Coach K? Is beating Duke, whether it's in the regular season at the Champions Classic, whether it's in the ACC regular season, whether it's in the ACC tournament, whether it's in the NCAA tournament, is it going to feel as good without Coach K? And so I think a lot of people are starting to wrap their heads around that. Like, man, I'm going to miss this guy. And then finally, what I would say is, I don't know. I don't think people are rooting for him, but I do think people are starting to get sad thinking about not being able to root against him the same way that, it was the same with Jeter and the same with Kobe. And then finally with this Duke team, what I would also say, I also think, I don't think this Duke team, I don't want to say people aren't rooting against Duke. They don't want Duke to win the championship, not in Coach K's final year. But what I would say is, this Duke team is sort of hard to root against, and let me explain why. Like, it's because of it's really because of what I said the last few weeks, is because I think we all thought this Coach K retirement tour was going to go a certain way. They were struggling all year, get into the NCAA tournament, and at some point, they're going to get knocked out. And I had them losing to Texas Tech. Some of you had them losing to Arkansas. Some of you had them losing to Gonzaga. Some of you had them losing to Memphis in the second, or not Memphis, whatever, I can't remember, Michigan State in the second round. But I bring it up because I think we all thought that if we got to this point, I don't think most people thought that Duke was making a Final Four. But I think we all thought if Duke got to this point, that it was going to be because of something sketchy, right? It was going to be because of the fact that Duke got all the calls, or it was going to be because of the fact that the refs wanted Duke to win, or that CBS wanted Duke to win, or that TBS wanted Duke to win. And that hasn't been the case at all. And that's why I think it's kind of hard for people to root. You can root against Duke, but when they just come out and they're making plays and they're beating Michigan State because they're the better team, or they're beating Texas Tech because they're the better team, I just think that's really hard to wrap your head around if you're a fan of, like, I hate them. Why? Because they're awesome and do everything that you wish your team could do? Because they're awesome and they make all the big plays? Like, Duke is not in the Final Four because the refs want them there, or because the TV executives want them there. They have gone out and in 3 straight games won 3 straight games in a way in which basically, like, I guess what I'm trying to say is they have gone out and won those games. Nobody's handed it to them. It hasn't been the refs. It hasn't been this. They've gone out and won it. So I don't want to belabor the point. I don't believe people are rooting for Coach K. I do believe that's his greatness, is how many people hate him. But I also do think people are starting to wrap their heads around the idea of, like, crap, man, like, I'm not going to be able to root against this guy anymore. That makes me kind of sad. That makes me